So before we really get super deep into all these fancy techniques and cool brushes and stuff like that, it's important to understand something, and that is that it's extremely, extremely important to be able to master the fundamentals before you move on to much more complex things. Now, I know we hear this all the time, right? I heard this all the time as an art student, that you need to master the fundamentals. And it kind of got boring after a while. And especially when you want to jump on to do a lot more fun, interesting things, the fundamentals can feel kind of like a drag. But let me give you an analogy to help explain why it's so important. Let's say that you had your dream house that you want to build, right? And you were so excited to get it built that when you started building it, the foundation, it was kind of shaky. You did that really quickly. The framing for the house, it was all right. The sheetrock was okay. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfectly smooth. The boards you cut weren't exactly the right size, but they were pretty close. But when you got to the shingles, oh, they were perfect. You had the perfect shingles. They looked beautiful on your house. The paint job was amazing. Perfect paint scheme throughout the entire house. The outside was beautiful, right? You had beautiful stonework all along your fireplace and the outside, right? The tile in the kitchen was amazing, right? The countertop, all this stuff, it was great. But unfortunately, because you didn't do all of the basics first, all of this other stuff can't fix that, right? A bunch of shingles can't fix a shaky or leaky roof. Really nice tile can't fix uneven ground. Really beautiful paint job can't fix crappy walls. So my point is that before you can really, really move on and become an amazing painter, you have to start with the basics, right? And the basics being things like drawing, perspective, light, color, shape, composition, right? These are all important fundamentals that it's really important to have a solid understanding of before you move on to doing a lot of small detail work, right? So even though it can be tempting to just move on and rush to the next part, really make sure that you have those parts of your painting down solidly, right? It's going to be boring sometimes to work on those things, but it's totally worth it. And by master, I don't just mean do it one time, right? Sometimes we've all drawn the box in perspective, right? The little cube, and then said, I know perspective now. That doesn't really cut it. There's so much more to perspective that you can learn that's really going to help your paintings. When it comes to light and color, we might have done a color wheel once in an art class and say that we know how to manage color. It's not really the same, right? It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of work. And this course will touch on some of those things. I also recommend, if you're wanting to really learn about some of the fundamentals, is to take my digital painting light and color course. It goes really in depth on those things. So anyways, that being said, keep that in mind as you go through this. Even though these parts might be boring, they're the important parts, so that by the time you do get to the fun stuff like the paint and the tiles and the shingles, the foundation underneath is so solid that it just makes everything else shine. So that's it for this lecture. I'll see you guys in the next one.